The alien spy walked right into his ambush. But she wasn't the real target. The perfect trap, the research moon, Kepler 7b, hung like a dead eye in the void, its cratered surface hiding secrets that 3 civilizations would kill for. Lieutenant, Commander Marcus Vale adjusted his thermal scope, watching the abandoned facility's main entrance through the perpetual twilight. The prototype weapon, designation Omega-7, sat in the vault 3 levels below, its quantum signature masked by the moon's natural interference. For 18 months, Earth's Tactical Intelligence Division had chased phantoms across the outer colonies. Every sabotaged mining operation, every mysteriously disabled defense grid, every accident that conveniently favored alien interests, all traced back to one name: Spectre. The codename had become a curse word in TID briefings, a ghost that killed humans and vanished without leaving so much as a footprint. Marcus had volunteered for this assignment after Spectre's operatives destroyed the research station on Titan, killing his brother and 47 other scientists. The brass had wanted someone with a personal stake, someone who wouldn't hesitate when the moment came. They'd gotten their man. The facility's power grid flickered, a brief disruption that would have seemed random to anyone not expecting it. Marcus smiled grimly. His trap was working. The leaked intelligence about Omega-7's location had been irresistible bait, carefully crafted to reach the right ears through a network of double agents and black market information brokers. Motion. Sensors picked up movement in the eastern corridor. The intruder was good. Thermal dampeners kept her heat signature minimal, and her movement pattern suggested military training. But Marcus had prepared for this. The facility's original security systems had been replaced with human-designed countermeasures, each one calibrated to exploit known alien weaknesses. Through his scope, he caught his first glimpse of the target. Nyxarian, definitely Nyxarian. The elongated limbs and translucent skin were unmistakable, even under the advanced stealth suit. Female, based on the bone structure visible through the suit's outline. She moved with predatory grace, each step calculated to avoid the pressure plates Marcus had deliberately left obvious. She was heading for the vault, just as predicted. Marcus began his descent through the facility's maintenance shafts, timing his movement to intercept her at the narrowest choke point. The abandoned laboratory on level 2 would be perfect. Multiple entry points for her to feel secure, but only one real exit once he sealed the blast doors. The Nyxarian reached the vault first, as expected. Marcus watched through hidden cameras as she examined the Omega-7 prototype, a sleek cylinder no larger than his forearm, containing enough destructive potential to crack a moon. Her scanner readings would show it was real. The TID had spared no expense in creating the perfect fake. She didn't take it, that was the first surprise. Instead, she placed a small device next to the weapon and began working on what looked like a containment field. Marcus frowned. Intelligence had suggested Spectre's operatives would steal the weapon, not whatever this was. The Nyxarian's movements became more urgent. Her scanner was detecting something, and she clearly didn't like what she found. Marcus made his decision, sealing the facility's exits and activating the localized gravity field that would prevent her from using Nyxarian jumping abilities to escape. She spun toward his position the moment the field activated, her weapon already drawn. Fast. Faster than the briefings had suggested. Marcus dove behind a reinforced workstation as energy bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. "Surrender, Spectre!" he shouted, returning fire with his plasma rifle. "There's nowhere to run. Spectre." Her voice carried genuine confusion, the universal translator rendering her words in crisp English. "Human, you don't understand what you're dealing with. That weapon, save it." Marcus cut her off, advancing with his rifle trained on her position. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. You're the architect of every human death in the outer colonies. Time to pay." The Nyxarian's violet eyes widened behind her helmet's visor. For a moment, something that looked almost like fear flickered across her alien features. "My name is Zira Voss," she said, slowly raising her hands. "And if you think I'm your enemy, then Spectre has already won." Interrogation and doubt. The containment cell on Marcus's ship, the TID Corvette Retribution, had been designed specifically for alien prisoners. Electromagnetic barriers prevented escape, while atmospheric processors maintained an environment suitable for most known species. Zira Voss sat in perfect stillness, her violet eyes tracking Marcus's movements as he paced outside the barrier. "Impressive vessel," she said, her translator rendering her words with clinical precision. "Fusion drive, military-grade shielding, and if I'm not mistaken, those are human-designed weapon systems. Your species has progressed remarkably quickly." Marcus ignored the commentary. "Let's start simple. How long have you been working for Spectre?" "I don't work for Spectre." Zira's response was immediate, without the telltale hesitation that indicated deception. "I hunt Spectre, just as you do." "Right." Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing colony surveillance footage. "Explain these then. Meridian Station, mining. Operation shut down after mysterious equipment failures. New Shanghai colony, defense grid disabled just before a pirate raid. Titan Research Facility, catastrophic reactor failure that killed 48 people." Zira leaned forward, studying the images intently. "I investigated Meridian and New Shanghai. The equipment failures weren't random. They were precision strikes, designed to look like accidents. As for Titan," her expression darkened. "I arrived too late. The reactor had already been sabotaged." "Convenient story," Marcus said, but something in her tone made him pause. The alien's body language suggested genuine distress, not the calculated responses he'd expect from a master spy. "Why should I believe you?" "Because," Zira said, standing and approaching the barrier, "I can tell you something about those incidents that wasn't in any official report. Something only the real saboteur would know." Marcus gestured for her to continue, his hand resting on his sidearm. "At Meridian, the mining equipment was disabled using a quantum virus, a piece of code that exists in superposition until observed, making it virtually undetectable. The virus targeted the safety protocols first, ensuring maximum casualties when the equipment failed. At New Shanghai, the defense grid wasn't simply disabled, it was reprogrammed to target the colony's own evacuation shuttles. Only the early TOI warning system malfunction prevented a massacre." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Neither of those details had been in the official reports. They'd been classified at the highest levels, known only to TID Command and the investigation teams. "How do you know that?" he asked quietly. "Because I'm part of a joint task force. Humans, Nixarians, and Kethvar working together to stop Spectre. We've been sharing intelligence for over a year." Zira's voice carried a note of urgency. "Check your secure channels. Contact Director Harrison Walsh at TID headquarters. He'll confirm everything I'm telling you." Marcus activated his communication array, sending an encrypted query to Earth. The response would take 40 minutes to reach him, 40 minutes during which he'd have to decide whether to trust the alien sitting in his brig. "Assuming you're telling the truth," he said, "what were you doing at that facility? Why were you trying to contain the Omega-7 prototype?" Zira's expression became grim. "Because it's not a prototype. It's a fully functional weapon, and it's been armed. My scans detected a quantum timer. Someone intended for it to detonate the moment it was moved. You weren't setting a trap for me, Marcus Vale. You were being used to eliminate me and destroy the evidence." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "That's impossible. The weapon was built by our own people." "Was it?" Zira interrupted. "Or was it built by someone who wanted you to think it was yours? Spectre's greatest talent isn't sabotage, it's manipulation. Making enemies of natural allies, turning investigations into executions, ensuring that anyone who gets close to the truth dies in an apparent accident." Marcus's communication console chimed. A priority message from Earth, encrypted with Director Walsh's personal codes. His hands shook slightly as he decoded it. The message was brief. "Agent Voss is authentic. Joint operation compromised. Abort mission immediately. Trust no one at TID except me. Spectre has infiltrated our highest levels." Marcus looked up at Zira, who was watching him with patient understanding. "The message confirms you're legitimate," he said slowly. But if Spectre is inside TID, then my orders to capture you came from Spectre. Zira finished. You were never hunting me, Marcus. You were being used to eliminate the one person who could expose the truth, and now that I'm in your custody instead of dead, Spectre will need to try a different approach. As if summoned by her words, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Marcus's tactical display lit up with incoming contacts. 3. Ship's configuration unknown, closing fast on his position. Let me guess, Zira said with bitter satisfaction. Rescue mission? Marcus was already moving toward the bridge. More like cleanup crew, and we're about to find out just how far Spectre's influence really extends. The hunters become the hunted. The 3 ships approaching through Kepler 7b's shadow were unlike anything in Marcus's recognition database. They moved with organic grace, hulls shifting and adapting to reduce their sensor signatures. One moment, they appeared as mining vessels. The next as civilian transports, their silhouettes flowing like liquid metal. Morphic hulls, Zira observed, having convinced Marcus to bring her to the bridge in restraints rather than leave her helpless in the brig. Kethvar technology, but modified. Spectre's signature is all over this. Marcus's tactical officer, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, looked up from his console with confusion. Sir, they're broadcasting TID authorization codes, claiming to be a rescue operation. Of course they are, Marcus muttered, studying the approaching vessels. Each one was slightly larger than his corvette, and their weapon signatures suggested firepower that could reduce the retribution to scrap in minutes. Jake, what's our status on the quantum drive? Charging, but we need another 8 minutes for a clean jump. 8 minutes they didn't have. The lead ship was already powering weapons, its hull reshaping into something distinctly predatory. Marcus made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. Zira, I'm releasing your restraints. If you're really hunting Spectre, then we need each other alive. The Nixarian rubbed her wrists as the magnetic bonds deactivated. Wise choice. Your ship's weapons won't penetrate those hulls. They're using adaptive armor that learns from each impact. But I know their weakness, which is there's still Kethvar ships underneath all that modification. Their power distribution systems follow classical Kethvar patterns, which means she moved to the tactical console, her elongated fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. If we target the junction points where the morphic hull connects to the original superstructure, we can force them back into their base configuration. The first enemy ship opened fire, energy beams lancing across space toward the retribution. Marcus threw his ship into an evasive spiral, using the moon's gravity well to slingshot around its far side. The maneuver bought them precious seconds but also revealed the true extent of their problem. Sir, Morrison called out, his voice tight with stress. Long-range sensors are picking up more contacts. Looks like they had a picket line set up around the entire moon. How many? Marcus demanded. 12 ships closing from all vectors. We're surrounded. Zira was still working at the tactical station, her scanner linked to the ship's targeting systems. There. I've identified the vulnerable points on the lead vessel. But you'll need to get close, within 200 kilometers. 200 clicks. Puts us inside their optimal firing range, Marcus pointed out. I know. Zira's violet eyes met his. Trust me. Marcus had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether his crew lived or died. The alien beside him could be exactly what she claimed, a fellow hunter seeking justice for Spectre's crimes, or she could be the most sophisticated enemy agent he'd ever encountered, leading him into a trap that would eliminate the last witness to Spectre's infiltration of TID. All hands, brace for combat maneuvers, he announced over the ship's intercom. Jake, bring us around, full attack vector on the lead ship. The Retribution spun on its axis, fusion engines flaring as it accelerated directly toward the approaching enemy. Energy beams filled the space around them, some missing by meters. Others deflected by their electromagnetic shielding. Marcus felt sweat beating on his forehead as he watched their range close. 800 kilometers, 600, 400. Now, Zira shouted. Marcus triggered the ship's main guns, twin plasma cannons unleashing focused streams of superheated matter. The beam struck exactly where Zira had predicted, and the effect was immediate. The enemy ship's morphic hull convulsed, its flowing surface suddenly rigid and locked into the angular configuration of a Kethvar destroyer. Hull integrity compromised, Morrison reported with amazement. Their adaptive armor is offline. Then let's finish this, Marcus said grimly, firing again. This time, the plasma beams punched through the enemy's hull, triggering secondary explosions that lit up the void like a dying star. But their victory was short-lived. The remaining ships were adjusting their approach, learning from their companions' destruction. Worse, Marcus could see additional contacts on long-range sensors, reinforcements arriving from the outer system. We can't fight them all, he admitted. Even with your targeting data, we're outnumbered 15-1. Zira was studying the tactical display with calculating eyes. Then we don't fight them. We run, but not the way they expect. She turned to Marcus with something that might have been a smile. How do you feel about crashing into a moon? Come again? The research facility where you found me. It's built into a series of natural caves that extend deep into Kepler-7b's crust. If we can reach the surface and get inside those caves, your ship's quantum signature will be masked by the moon's mineral deposits. They'll lose us on sensors. Marcus stared at her. You're talking about a controlled crash on a moon with barely any atmosphere. The margin for error is practically non-existent. But it's better than being vaporized by Spectre's fleet, Zira pointed out reasonably. Marcus looked at his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear on their faces. They'd followed him this far, trusted his judgment even when it meant allying with an alien prisoner. He couldn't let them down now. Jake, plot a descent vector for the research facility, and pray that our Nixarian friend knows what she's talking about. Underground revelations. The Retribution hit Kepler-7b's surface like a meteor, its hull screaming against rock and ice as Marcus fought to control their descent. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in crimson as they skidded through the entrance to the cave system. The ship's hull scraping against ancient stone walls that had been carved out millennia ago by unknown hands. When they finally came to rest, deep inside the moon's crust, the silence was deafening. Emergency power hummed quietly, and the air recycling systems worked overtime to clear the smoke from overloaded circuits. But they were alive, and more importantly, they were hidden. Damage report, Marcus called out, pulling himself from his captain's chair. The crash had thrown everyone around despite the inertial dampeners. Port engine is dead, starboard engine is damaged but functional, Morrison reported, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Main weapons are offline, but sensors are working. The good news is we're completely invisible to anyone scanning from orbit. Zira was already at the sensor station, her expression troubled. The bad news is that this cave system extends for hundreds of kilometers. We're not alone down here. Marcus joined her at the console, studying the complex network of tunnels and chambers that honeycombed the moon's interior. What am I looking at? Ruins, she said quietly. This moon was inhabited, once long before any of our species reached the stars. The research facility above was built to study these caves, not to develop weapons. She turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. Marcus, the Omega-7 prototype, it's not human technology. It's based on something found down here. That's impossible, Marcus protested. I've seen the development files. It was created by our best scientists. Scientists working from artifacts recovered from this site. Zira interrupted. Check your ship's database. Cross-reference the Omega-7 project with archaeological expedition reports from Kepler-7b. Marcus activated his personal tablet, accessing the classified files he'd been given for this mission. The more he read, the colder he felt. The Omega-7 project had indeed been based on recovered alien technology, but the reports made it clear that human scientists had only partially understood what they were reverse engineering. According to this, he said slowly, the original artifact was described as a containment device, not a weapon. Something designed to imprison rather than destroy. Now you're beginning to understand, Zira said. The beings who built this place were trying to contain something that Spectre has now released. A new alarm began sounding. Proximity. Sensors detecting movement in the cave system. multiple contacts approaching from deeper in the tunnel network. Marcus drew his sidearm, but Zira placed a restraining hand on his arm. "They're not hostile," she said. "At least not to us." The first figure that emerged from the shadows was humanoid but clearly alien, tall and ethereal, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Behind it came others, a Kethvar in powered armor, 2 more Nixarians, and to Marcus's shock, a human woman in TID uniform. "Agent Voss," the human said, relief evident in her voice. "We were beginning to think Spectre had eliminated you." "Agent Yates," Zira replied warmly. "I should have known you'd find a way to track me. Marcus Vale, meet Rachel Yates, my partner, in the Joint Task Force. And before you ask, yes, she's really human, and yes, she's really on our side." Rachel Yates was a compact woman with short brown hair and intense green eyes. She wore the uniform of a TID commander, but her insignia had been modified with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. "Commander Vale," she said formally. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this. Your mission briefing was compromised from the start." "By Spectre," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "By someone calling themselves Spectre," the ethereal figure corrected, its voice like wind through crystal. "I am Keth Nalar of the Void Wardens. What you call Spectre is something far more ancient and dangerous than a mere saboteur." Marcus felt reality shifting around him as the pieces fell into place. The containment device. Spectre isn't working for alien interests. It's the thing that was supposed to be contained. A psychic entity of immense power, Keith Nalar confirmed. It feeds on conflict, growing stronger with each war it instigates. Your species' rapid expansion into space caught its attention. It has been manipulating all of our civilizations, turning us against each other to harvest the psychic energy generated by fear, hatred, and violence. The sabotage missions, Zira added. They weren't random. Each attack was designed to increase tensions between our species, to make cooperation impossible. Spectre wants us at war. Rachel activated a portable holographic projector, showing a 3-dimensional map of the cave system. We've been tracking Spectre's influence for over a year. Every time we got close, our own agencies turned against us. It's been feeding information to all sides, making each species believe the others are the enemy. But you've been working together, Marcus observed. How did you avoid its influence? By operating in the shadows, Keth Nalar replied. By trusting individuals rather than institutions. And by understanding that Spectre's greatest weakness is the very cooperation it seeks to prevent. A deep rumble echoed through the caves, followed by the distant sound of weapons fire. On their sensors, new contacts were appearing. The enemy fleet had found another way into the cave system. "They're coming," Morrison reported grimly. "Multiple dropships, ground troops, and something else. Something big." Rachel checked her equipment, her expression grim. "Spectre knows we're all here together. It's going to try to eliminate us once and for all." Marcus looked around at the unlikely group of allies surrounding him. Human, Nixarian, Kethvar, and something else. Entirely. All united by their opposition to an ancient evil that had been manipulating their civilizations from the shadows. "Then we'd better make sure it fails," he said, checking his weapons. "Because if we don't stop it here, this war is going to consume everything we've built." Part 5. The Truth About Humanity. The ancient chamber deep beneath Kepler 7b's surface was vast enough to house a dozen starships. Its walls covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with their own inner light. At its center stood a structure that defied easy description, part machine, part organism, its surface shifting between solid matter and something that hurt to look at directly. The original containment matrix, Keith Nalar explained as their group approached the structure, built by the precursors to imprison entities that existed outside normal spacetime. When your scientists found the Omega-7 device, they accidentally created a resonance key that weakened the barriers. Marcus could feel something pressing against his mind, a presence that whispered of power and promised easy solutions to complex problems. Around him, his unlikely allies were struggling with the same influence. Rachel Yates had her hands pressed to her temples, while the Kethvar warrior's armor was cycling through defensive patterns. "It's trying to get inside our heads," Zira said through gritted teeth. "This is how it spreads its influence, direct psychic contact." The chamber filled with new sounds as Spectre's forces poured in through multiple entrances. But these weren't the morphic ships they'd fought in space. These were beings from a dozen different species, their eyes glowing with unnatural light, moving with perfect coordination despite their diverse origins. "Puppets," Rachel observed grimly. "It's been collecting agents from every species it encounters." Among the controlled beings, Marcus recognized faces from TID files, agents who had been declared dead or missing in action. They advanced with inhuman precision, weapons raised, but their faces showed no emotion, no recognition of their former humanity. "We can't fight them all," Morrison said, checking his ammunition. "There are too many." "We don't need to fight them," Marcus realized, understanding flooding through him. "We need to fight what's controlling them." He turned to Keth Nalar. "The containment matrix, can it be repaired?" "Not with conventional technology. The void," Warden replied. "The precursors used psychic engineering, technologies that operated on the interface between mind and matter. Only a species with similar capabilities could—" "Humans," Zira interrupted, her violet eyes wide with understanding. "That's why Spectre has been so focused on humanity. It's not just another species to manipulate, it's the one species that could potentially threaten it." Rachel was studying her tablet, cross-referencing data from the Joint Task Force's investigations. "The pattern makes sense now. Every human who showed strong psychic potential was either recruited by Spectre or eliminated. The sabotage missions weren't just about creating conflict, they were about identifying and removing humans who could pose a threat. The possessed agents were getting closer, but something was wrong with their formation. They were hesitating, fighting against their control. Marcus could see the struggle in their faces, brief flashes of awareness before the unnatural glow returned to their eyes. "It's having trouble maintaining control," he observed. "The psychic field is too diffuse across this many subjects." Keth Nalar's crystalline form brightened. "If we could disrupt its concentration, force it to focus on a single target, it would have to release the others," Marcus finished. He looked around at his companions, seeing the same realization in their faces. "Someone needs to make direct contact with the containment matrix, draw Spectre's full attention." "That's suicide," Morrison protested. "Direct contact with that thing would fry your brain in seconds." "Not necessarily," Zira said quietly. "Humans process psychic energy differently than other species. Your minds are more chaotic, less structured. It's harder for entities like Spectre to fully control human consciousness because you're naturally resistant to psychic domination." Marcus was already moving toward the containment matrix before anyone could stop him. The structure seemed to pulse in response to his approach, its surface becoming more solid, more real. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of battle as his allies engaged the controlled agents, buying him precious seconds. The moment his hand touched the matrix's surface, the world exploded into sensation. He found himself standing in a space that existed between dimensions, facing something that had no fixed form, but radiated malevolent intelligence. "Foolish human," Spectre's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You cannot comprehend what you face. I have manipulated civilizations across the galaxy. I have turned species against each other for millennia. What makes you think one primitive mind can stand against me?" "Because," Marcus said, feeling the strength of his convictions anchor him in this impossible space. "You've never faced humanity before. We're not like the other species. We don't think the way you expect us to." Around him, he could sense the psychic threads that Spectre used to control its agents. Thousands of minds, all connected to the entity's will, all fighting against the imposed control. Marcus reached out with thoughts he didn't know he possessed, touching those connections. "What are you doing?" Spectre's voice carried a note of confusion, then growing alarm. "Stop! You don't understand the forces you're manipulating." But Marcus did understand. Humanity's chaotic nature, Their refusal to accept simple answers, their tendency to question authority, these weren't weaknesses. They were strengths that made them naturally resistant to psychic domination. And more than that, they were contagious. Through the psychic network, Marcus shared human concepts with the controlled minds. Doubt, rebellion, the refusal to accept easy answers. The network began to destabilize as beings across the galaxy suddenly found themselves questioning orders they'd followed without thought. Impossible, Spectre raged. I have controlled minds for eons. No species has ever... No species, like humanity, Marcus corrected, feeling the entity's control beginning to fracture. We're too stubborn to stay controlled and too curious to stop asking questions. And now, thanks to you, every species in the galaxy is connected to that network. They're all learning to think like humans. The psychic space around them began to collapse as Spectre's carefully constructed control system fell apart. Marcus felt himself being pulled back to normal reality, but not before he sensed something else. A feeling of gratitude from thousands of minds, suddenly free to think for themselves. He opened his eyes to find himself back in the ancient chamber, surrounded by confused but no longer controlled beings from a dozen species. The containment matrix was pulsing with renewed energy, its barriers holding something that now seemed much smaller and less threatening. Is it over? Rachel asked, helping him to his feet. Marcus looked around at the former agents of Spectre, seeing awareness and confusion in their eyes as they struggled to remember who they really were. Some were already removing their weapons. Others were looking around in bewilderment at their surroundings. The immediate threat is contained, Kethnaller confirmed, its form brightening with something that might have been relief. But the real work is just beginning. These beings will need help recovering from their psychic enslavement, and there will be others across the galaxy who were affected. Then we'd better get started, Marcus said, looking at his unlikely team of allies. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's cleaning up messes and helping others do the same. Zira smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he'd seen from her. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership. As they began the work of coordinating rescue operations and deprogramming Spectre's former agents, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his mission had taken. He'd started out hunting an alien saboteur, and ended up discovering that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their fundamental refusal to be controlled by anyone or anything, even ancient psychic entities that had manipulated civilizations for millennia. It was, he thought with satisfaction, a very human way to save the galaxy.